Nympsfield Barrow, and it's on the Cotswolds, on the top of the escarpment, overlooking the valley towards the River Severn, one of the great rivers of Britain. And he's part of the Cotswold Severn group of Long Barrow's chambered tombs, and they are a collective form of tomb. That is, they're not there to celebrate just one man or woman, but their offspring too. And there's an interesting story about social organisation in Long Barrows, which I'll go into another video. But my walk today is about Woodchester, and from that word Chester, you know we're talking Roman. But my walk starts here, so I thought I'd do some stuff with the Barrow as well. It's a very pretty barrow, and it's been well preserved, unlike some barrows that have not been preserved by archaeologists. This barrow has been kept in place, probably reconstructed after it's been taken apart. And that taking apart is very important, because we learn bits and pieces about not just how, but why they built these things. So these long chambered tombs are long earthen barrows with dry stone walls. But what wasn't known, and is known now from excavation, is that there are revetments inside, compartments, bulwarks that stop the whole thing from collapsing outwards. So you'd build these walls, these compartments, then fill it with rubble. And then at the front, there's normally a horned area, a forecourt as some people call it, and we think ceremonies, feasts, whatever took place here. And then within, chambers to the side, where, based on the evidence from Hazelton, different parts of the family were buried, and those different parts were well demarcated. But these are houses for the dead. As some people think, stone is symbolically a material for housing dead, and wood is for the living. But as we know from Wayland Smithy and other places, they were originally other tombs underneath. These places have been used for generations, and I don't know in this case, but certainly in Wayland Smithy there was a wooden, let's call it a charnel house, whatever you want to call it, and then they built. The fashion for stone building came along. And this was about 5,500 years ago. So they're very, very interesting. They're a cultural phenomenon that lasted only 200 years or so. So, you know, just a few generations. And obviously it's a huge amount of effort, and you can't blame them for giving it up. But it's spread in quite a wide area and is emblematic of the Neolithic people of this country. Woodchester mansion. It's now a National Trust, it's not open at the moment. We're heading in towards Woodchester. I'm not sure whether I'm able to cut through into the village, but anyway, it's a nice walk anyway. But Woodchester is south of Stroud. Now, I'm mispronouncing that. I know this because when I got to Bristol, when I was young, old people called it Stroud. And now it's called Stroud. I was just talking to some locals about whether they call it Stroud or Stroud, and they call it Stroud. But one of the ladies said that her mother, who had a Gloucester accent, would have pronounced it something a bit like Stroud, a bit like Stroud. So that it was the accent. So it's one of those questions like whose authenticity is something. You know, I'm not going to buck the people call it Stroud. The reason I'm asking is that the English Place Name Society mentions that it's a phonetic pronunciation, and as we know, there are virtually no places in England, as any American will tell you, that is pronounced the way it's spelt. So, and the English Place Name Society recognises its phonetic pronunciation, so it might be pretty unique around here. If you've got any doubt about what I'm saying, think about how you pronounce Reading or London. It's not Reading and it's not London. So yes, so whose authenticity is it? Maybe it's just died and I just need to leave it alone. But anyway, we're not doing Stroud. We're doing a very pretty valley in Woodchester. So this is the, not manor, mansion. This is Woodchester Mansion. The reason I'm trying to avoid saying the word manor is because the manor is, I believe, over the top of the Roman mosaic, or the Roman villa, or very, very close to it in the village of Woodchester. Woodchester is Wodu Tiastre, and it's in 2 Saxon charters, with some interesting information about social organisation as well. So, because it mentions that a priest, a praost from Chester Setna, which means the people of the city, and it's not Woodchester, it's Worcester. And they were the people who are meant to have owned this land, but there was some sort of dispute with a private landlord. So he met that private landlord's sort of land agent or manager, and the charter calls him a Yenet, and that's a free man who serves a lord. This is later on, this is quite much later on in the Saxon period. There's lords come into prominence. We get the medieval system, feudalism, starting to appear. And the Yenet and the praost ride around the place here. The charter says they yarad around the estate, looking at the boundaries, which is a perambulation. And ignore the year bit, because that's just for emphasis. It's a bit like saying he was arisen, as opposed to saying he rose. It's just another, it's an emphatic way of saying the same thing. So it's handy that the 2 Saxon charters talk of the same place. They match quite well. So I was just met a couple of archaeologists who were out surveying, handily with their yardsticks in clipboards. You could tell they were archaeologists, and asked them a few questions. And and I mentioned, was this Wiedenkumba, which means wide comb, on the east, on the west of the Charter of Woodchester, because there's 2 combes. And I mentioned that the charter says it's only 3 hides, which is not a massive area. So this is if you were thinking of Woodchester in the early medieval period, this might be the furthest you would go out to think of it as being part of the estate. If you were only thinking 3 hides, it might be more likely that the next combe is Weedang combe. We don't know. But perhaps things like tithe maps and enclosure acts and so on might give us more information. It might be worth having another look. But I did ask the guy from the National Trust, and he said this field here is home mead, which doesn't help us, but it gives a little bit extra colour. We can add it to the map. The house behind us is neo-Gothic. It is Victorian. It is not of much interest to us amateur antiquarians, but it is it's worth coming to have a look. I mean, if you're into having a nice walk somewhere pretty, it's ideal to turn a corner and find that, which is probably the whole point when they were deciding to build that. There apparently was an 18th century building here as well, but there is not much hope of, because the charters are based on older charters, and we can tell that because they only really do a few points. And the really, really old Saxon charters talk about the estate to the north, the estate to the east, the estate to the south, and the estate to the west. Later charters go turn left at this point, go right over here, follow it for a couple of miles there, go right, you know. So they go into more depth. So it's really hard to pinpoint where this, where Weedon Coomer is, but who knows? It's a nice walk.